So far, the new year has been hazardous, as in hazardous waste. Every day seems to bring a new spill or discovery of trouble. The head of the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Liesl Eichler Clark, is here to talk about a long list of worry. And this year's elections could bring a record turnout in Michigan. Good news, right? But the warning buzzers are sounding over our ability to handle the turnout. We'll talk with Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Today is Sunday, January 19th, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. All right, welcome to Flashpoint. Good to have you with us this morning after a week when trying to keep up with the news kind of looked a little bit like this. The stories just kept coming and coming. Yes, articles of impeachment delivered from the House over to the Senate. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presiding and swearing in the 100 members of the jury. They all swore to be impartial, but it's a fair question whether any of them are, at heart, truly impartial at this stage. As that was happening, the president was signing phase one of the trade agreement with China, and the replacement for NAFTA, the USMCA, took effect as law. Any other week, those developments would have kept us busy enough, but they had to compete with the compelling stories of Lev Parnas, former colleague of Rudolph Giuliani, who needed a really big bus to fit all of the people he was throwing under it, from the president to vice president to the attorney general. Does it change the course of events in the Senate starting this coming Tuesday? Back here in Michigan, Lucy had even more trouble keeping up with the conveyor belt, just with the environmental worries that kept coming at us. We have talked about the ooze along I-696 and the spill into the Detroit River at Detroit Bulk Storage, but the questions keep outnumbering the answers, especially when we find bulk storage didn't have a permit to operate, and then the city told our Karen Drew they weren't sure how many others might be operating along the river without a permit. After the horrors of Flint, it is fair to ask, who is watching out for us? The head of EGLE, Liesl Eichler Clark, is here today to talk about it. And then Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, we're going to talk about the worries that a record turnout could lead to an embarrassing election night for the state of Michigan, which you may have heard expects to play a critical role in Decision 2020. It's all this morning on Flashpoint.
To be held responsible for the lack of work that was done.
Well, there's no question that the amount of chemicals and what was left behind, the owner is paying a price for.
I find it interesting that the blight tickets are issued right when we started reporting on the story. Coincidence?
It is a coincidence.
I start to hear on the news that the green ooze was coming out on the side of the freeway. And I have security cameras on my building.
This exclusive surveillance video shot late November of last year. In the video, you can see a person using heavy-duty equipment, removing items from inside electroplating services in Madison Heights.
We found another company just slipping through the cracks in the city of Detroit, not knowing that it was happening.
That is just some of, if I may say, the terrific reporting that's been done by my colleagues here at Local 4, Karen Drew and Hank Winchester. Unfortunately, their story list only seems to grow. From green ooze in Madison Heights to worries up in Sanilac County, from spills downriver to the dioxane plume threatening the water in Ann Arbor. Let's talk about all of it with the director of EGLE, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Liesl Eichler Clark. Liesl, thanks very much for coming this morning. The fact that I don't know where to start, I guess, is a pretty good place to start. It is a target-rich environment for you. All of these different problems that seem to have bubbled up at once, but they've really been there for many, many years, decades in some cases. What's the one, if there's one, that keeps you awake most at night right now?
Well, I think there's not a lot of good sleep right now, I think would be a good way to say it. So, you know, we have a lot of conversations, obviously, about the things that look immediate and the challenges that we're dealing with right in front of us. But we all know that we're also looking forward to continued high water levels. And so in the back of my mind, on top of all of the immediate incidences, it's how are we as a state dealing with the challenges of the high water levels in the Great Lakes. We talk a lot about shoreline erosion, but we all know that it's also inland lakes and streams as well. There are parts of our state that have been struggling with this for well over a year, where we've got people's homes and public health in jeopardy. So there's a fairly long list.
A long list. Then we also have the PFAS. When you start talking about all that inland water, what's in it? Although we did have the House passed a measure on that, will remain to be seen what that does for us. I've talked to a number of I've talked to members of Congress in the past week. I've talked to local leaders who are working on the ground on these problems, and a lot of them believe that Eagle is just kind of overwhelmed, that you don't have the resources or the people to handle all these problems.
Well, I would say I'm really proud of the team that I work with. And so I have been on the ground with this team for about a year now. I will say that I think, you know, as you said in your opener, this is an agency that has a legacy of Flint. We have a trust bucket with a hole in the bottom of it. We get that. I have no concerns whatsoever about the experience, expertise, and the professionalism of the staff. That being said, I know we got to go above and beyond every time. We got to go above and beyond to communicate and to meet communities where they're at. And so I do feel like some of the recent examples show us great experiences in that capacity, right? So our team has gone above and beyond and done things like public hearings and additional outreach that has really helped to share the information about what's going on at some of these locations. But we always have to do more, and we get that.
I have no doubt that we've got a lot of people that are working very hard and very long hours right now. But the question becomes, do you have the teeth to actually, you know, are the laws in place that give you the strength and the prosecutorial power that you need? Because I sometimes feel like you're waiting on the Attorney General to get busy with some things. And she this past week said, well, we're waiting for our marching orders from Eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're working closely together with the Attorney General's office, but I think there's a really good question here. So to me, there's multiple pieces, right? So there's people, there's technology, and then there's the policy framework, right? And so I have had numerous conversations with our friends at the legislature as well as with the administration about what do we want to see from a policy framework perspective. So that conversation is ongoing. Frankly, we're doing incident reviews of a variety of the recent challenges. I want more answers from my team, not seeking retribution, but how can we get better? Let's figure out how we can strive towards excellence and do a better job as we're implementing these challenges.
Well, there's getting things better, but there's also holding a lot of people accountable. And we've got people in fact, in some cases, you've got businesses that have been out of business for decades, but their debris, their garbage, the chemicals, whatever, are still there. In fact, that's the case we have in Ann Arbor, isn't it, with the dioxane plume? That company is no longer even in business that's responsible for it.
So they're not in business, but they sold and renamed. So there is still a responsible party, but you raise a really good point, which is some of the sites in Michigan are state sites where the taxpayer is going to be on the hook for the cleanup. And we got to do that effectively and efficiently, either us or EPA, right? And we'll partner with the locals to do that. The other sites in Michigan have responsible parties. And when there are responsible parties, we want to do everything in our capacity and in our power to make sure that that cleanup is paid for and done by the responsible party.
Let's get to your relationship with the EPA,
Yes.
because I'm not sure which horse leads the other horse in this. Sometimes people want to, I think sometimes people think that Eagle needs to lead and bring the EPA in. EPA sometimes seems to be that they're the first line of responsibility. Where is it? Because Eagle has been really criticized for the EPA had money, Superfund money, ready to spend in Michigan, and Eagle, or whether it was the MDEQ at the time, I'm not sure actually when that was, basically told them, no, we've cleaned this up, we don't need the money anymore. You know, first rule of government spending is never give back the money.
I completely agree.
You don't get it the next time around.
Completely agree.
So who's the first line of responsibility? Is it Eagle or is it the EPA?
So I know this is not an answer people like, but it really does depend on the site. It depends on who can bring bigger resources to bear and make a better impact, right? So we work closely with our partners at Region 5, and even just yesterday, there are conversations about what's the best path forward on some of these projects, like the Gelman Challenge in Ann Arbor. So I know it's not a clean answer.
That's the dioxane plume, by the way.
Exactly, thank you. But it's not a clean answer, but it's an important answer because we want to make sure that we're getting the most resources and the fastest cleanup. Whether it's EPA, in some cases, it needs to be Superfund and it's EPA. In some cases, the agency can do better. Eagle can do better. And we want to partner, I got to be clear, we want to partner with our locals all the time. Our locals know what's going on the ground. We are
Some of them are clearly overwhelmed too.
Absolutely.
I mean, the city of Detroit not knowing whether permits have been granted to some of these folks, they're ticketing them now. But I'm not sure that's a couple $1,000s is not going to really is not what we're talking about with the cleanup. I want to go back to what you talked about with trust. we've all wondered how long it was going to be before the people of Flint really believed when somebody says, well, no, you can drink the water now. How long were they going to? But I think we continually see new problems with that. We're now being told that the water in the Detroit River hasn't been affected by this spillage, but then it turns out where they're testing the water from is upriver from where the problem is. The take-in site is actually, it's also on the closer to the Canadian side that is the Detroit side. So how can people be assured that they're really getting the right testing being done?
Yeah, well, I mean, the testing locations are really critical, and we work really closely with the Great Lakes Water Authority, right? So they're the ones who know where their testing intakes are, and they know the current status of the tests that they've done. So what we do, for example, in an issue with the Detroit River is we get on the phone with them immediately, and we say, hey, this is what we know. You got to get out there and test. We got to make sure that drinking water supplies have not been contaminated.
Well, I guess my question then is who's testing the testers? Because if you're testing the river somewhere away from where the contamination site is before it gets to the contamination site, that doesn't seem helpful if you live in Wyandotte.
But it needs to be where the intake is, right? Because that's where the water's being coming into the system, right? So it needs to be where the intake is. That's the logical place to go find the contamination. So we do talk with them regularly, absolutely. They report back to our team. Drinking Water Environmental Health Division has regular conversations with drinking water systems across the state. And let's keep in mind that it's not just the municipal drinking water systems. We still have 25% of the Michigan population is on well water, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we all know in the Thumb in particular, there's high levels of arsenic. There's challenges across the state from a well water perspective. So, you know, there are a lot of things that go into making sure that drinking water is as safe as possible for our residents.
How worried are you about the PFAS problem?
So I am continually encouraged by the work of the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, the MPART group. This started under Governor Snyder. Governor Whitmer continued it. It's a cross-agency conversation. We are working tactically to get drinking water standards in place. So this MCL process is ongoing. We were directed by the governor to do that in the spring, and we've got public hearings right now on that. We're getting tons of good comment, and that's going to be another way that we can have an administrative action in place that can help protect Michiganders. You know, but we've got to keep taking every step that we can. And I'm sure you know the governor, the attorney general, and I announced the lawsuit against the manufacturers this week as well. So we're going to stay active on this.
I worry, and I know this is part of what keeps you awake, is trying what you don't know. And we probably would not have understood how bad the problem was in Madison Heights if the green ooze hadn't suddenly shown up on 696. We don't know how many problems that's caused before, but isn't that a bigger problem? How much is in this, as you mentioned, we were talking before going on the air, decades and decades of being an industrial powerhouse. There's a lot in the dirt.
Yeah, and you know, our environment is closely intertwined with our industrial heritage, right? And part of the reason that our economy grew up the way it did is because of our water, because our water was not only an input to economy, but also a way to transport. So it's all tightly linked, and we got to understand that. We do have also decades of disinvestment, not only in the department, but also in infrastructure across the state that causes problems. So there are a lot of pieces to this big puzzle. So the piece that I'm looking at, how can I run the department more effectively and efficiently to make a difference for my 10 million bosses, right? So one of the first pieces to me is clearly technology. So when we look at this site, when we look at the Madison Heights site electroplating services, my team went through a 3-foot high stack of paper in order to get all the background. That paper shouldn't exist. All those materials should be scanned in. When we look at sites, he has 4 properties across the state. The office that's closest to that property in that part of the state should be able to pull up the entire file and take a look at it and understand what they need to do. So we got to invest in technology to make a difference.
And I keep going back to the fact that at his sentencing, he complained to the judge that regulations were putting him out of business, the regulations that he clearly wasn't following.
Well, and let's be clear, this is not industry in Michigan. Industry in Michigan typically is interested in doing the right thing, right? And we're going to partner with those that want to do the right thing, and we're going to be a thorn in the side that those that don't.
We didn't get to McLeod Steel. There's so many here that we still didn't get to.
We'll have to do it again?
We will do it again.
Okay.
Liesl, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. We come back, we'll talk with Secretary of State of the state of Michigan, Jocelyn Benson, about election 2020.